Ava, Tim, Allie. Tim's missing more school. All right. So last thing we talked about was
DOMA.
Article 4.
Article 4. Let me remind you that we are talking about interstate. Article 4 is talking about interstate relations and state and federal relations. And we talked about the full faith and credit clause. Yes?
Yes.
All right. So from there, we move in to what's called privileges and immunity. We're still in Article 4. Okay. Now, let's start with the privileges part. Okay. So remember, we're talking about state relations, interstate relations. Okay. So as I believe everybody in here is a resident of the state of Kansas. Cadence, welcome back. Good to see you. It's been a while.
Yep.
Okay. Everybody here is a resident of the state of Kansas. Yes? And as a resident of the state of Kansas, you have the privilege of voting in Kansas elections. Yes? If you are a border ruffian from Missouri, you don't have the privilege of voting in Kansas and trying to turn us into a slave state. If you're a jayhawker, you don't have the privilege of voting in Missouri. Yes? Another privilege that you have as being a resident of the state of Kansas is the possibility, if you chose to go to Wichita State, Emporia State, Pitt State, Fort Hays State, K-State, or the University of Kansas, you would pay what kind of tuition? In-state tuition. If you go out of state to a state university, depending on, some of our neighboring states have some deals with Kansas and vice versa, you would have to pay out-of-state tuition. Yes? So I have some experience with this. I've done it multiple times. Like when I lived in Florida and finished my last 2 years of college in Georgia, I'd pay out-of-state tuition. And then when I moved to Kansas, I decided to go back to school to become a teacher. So I had met my wife at the beach in 1994. She was at the beach. I lived at the beach. Okay. And we met. And then we dated. She was from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And so we dated 10 months. Long distance, back and forth. She had a better job than I did. So when I said, I think this is the one, I told my dad, I said, Dad, I'm going to Louisiana. And so I moved to Baton Rouge. She got a job. I got a room. One of her friends that had an extra room in her house. She had a roommate already, Bobby, and I was her second roommate. So it's like Three's Company if you ever saw that show. Okay. Turns out Bobby was gay. I didn't know it, but he's gay. Okay. Bobby came out a few years later. Okay. Nice guy. He was friends with all the girls. You know what I mean? Nice guy. And anyhow, redhead. Bobby. Okay. Yeah. So anyhow, I was getting ready to enroll at LSU to go back to school to become a teacher. And my wife got this job offer in Wichita, Kansas. Now, she wasn't my wife yet. She was just my girlfriend. So we were in Baton Rouge for 6 months. She goes up to Wichita for an interview, flies back up for a second interview. They offer her a job. And I'm like, well, we've been dating for like 14, 15 months. I'm like, well, I'm not letting this one get away. So they flew her up for a house hunting trip. She's going to buy a house up here. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go with you. So I went with her. And while we were here, we're staying at the Marriott on the east side, that tall Marriott over there on the 10th floor. And I asked her to marry me. She said yes. So she got a job, found the house, and I'm like, hey, this is the house we want. And it was good. Same house we live in. Haven't moved since, okay? Been here for 27 years, okay? And that was 95. So we move up here. Now, I'm living in the basement because we're just fiancés right at this point, right? Okay, so it's really awkward because her parents, like the first 2 weeks we come up to Wichita, her parents are here. Like they're staying at the house and I'm staying in the basement. You know what I mean? I don't have money to buy an apartment. I don't even have a job. Who's this mooch living in the basement? Seriously. I don't think they liked me. I don't know if they really ever did like me. But it's okay. I did give them their only grandkids, so. Right? Yeah. So anyhow, next thing you know, I got to find a job, and I'm going to enroll at Wichita State. So I enroll in Wichita State January of 1996, and I'm going to be a teacher. And I'm going to get Kansas teaching license. Yes, that's valid only in Kansas. Okay, and then I get a job. And I'm working 20, 25, 30 hours a week, full-time, not full-time, 40 hours full-time, but, 20, 35 hours a week, and I'm going to school full-time. I'm busting my butt. I got my goal. What do I want to be? I want to be a high school history teacher and a baseball coach. That's my goal. So everything I'm doing is like blinders on, go, right? And you guys know that, right? You want to achieve anything in life? You focus, you get that goal, and you focus on it, and you don't let anything stand in the way of that, right? You understand that, right? That's what you do, and you can achieve anything, right? So everybody I met say, what are you doing? What are you up to? I'm like, well, I want to be a high school teacher and a baseball coach. I teach social studies, okay? So I do that for a year, and we came back down to Baton Rouge, got married, okay? And then I do that for a year, and I go to enroll in 97, January 97 at Wichita State. And they say, I'm expecting to pay in-state tuition. And they say, well, no, you have to pay out of state. I'm like, well, hold up now. Why would I move here from Baton Rouge, Louisiana to get a Kansas teaching license at Wichita State University and go back to Louisiana when it doesn't even work in Louisiana? What are you thinking? So I went through the whole appeals process. Is it that Wichita State has some awesome education program? No, because they don't. Now in Poirier State, they're known as a teacher's college. Like they're one of the best in the country. Wichita State's not. I did it. I can promise you it's not. Okay? You can probably tell by my teaching. But anyhow, so I just said to Wichita State, I said, all right, see ya. And I went to Newman. Okay. And I had to pay a little bit more because private tuition, but out of state really, it wasn't that much more than out of state. And I could finish the semester earlier at Newman and get a job. And so I went to Newman. And I said, screw you. Now, when I wanted to get my master's in history, Newman and Friends don't have that. So I had to go crawling back to Wichita State to take those classes. But you know what? You got to stick it to the man. So listen, if I'm not a resident in the state of Kansas, then I don't need Kansas tags. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever had to pay for tags yet or your parents take care of that, but your tags in Kansas are based on the value of your vehicle. So I bought a new truck. It's 2021. Value, it's expensive. I went to get tags on it. It's like $800. Okay. Now in Florida, to get new tags, $50. Okay, so I just called my dad back in Florida and said, hey Dad, renew my tags for me. So I kept doing that for a few years to stick it to the man, Kansas. Okay. And I even had a job here teaching at Carroll, and people were like, why do you have Florida tags? I'm like, well, let me tell you a story. Okay. So privilege of attending in-state tuition. Okay. All right. So good story. All right. Now let's talk about immunities. Okay, so when you travel to another state, they can't treat you differently because you're from another state. Okay, they can't like punish you harsher for something or mistreat you because you're not from Kansas. You know what I mean? So you have immunity. There's also some immunities when say you are somebody that is wanted for a crime. So let's say you commit an armed robbery of a liquor store in Wichita, and you start running from the cops. You get to 135 and you're headed south towards Oklahoma. You're going to outrun the cops and you're going to get to Oklahoma. Now, by this time, the Kansas State Troopers are on your tail. But you make it to Oklahoma. Can those Kansas State Troopers follow you in Oklahoma? Yeah, they have a driver's license. Remember full faith and credit clause? They can drive in Oklahoma. Can they arrest you in Oklahoma? No, they don't have jurisdiction in Oklahoma. So they call ahead to the Oklahoma State Troopers and say, hey, we're chasing this guy. He's coming towards you. Throw down some spikes or something to stop him, okay? And arrest him because he's wanted for armed robbery of a liquor store in Wichita. So the Oklahoma cops stop you, arrest you, and they hand them back to the Kansas State Troopers and take you back. No, they can't, okay? Because you have immunities in that state. You didn't commit that crime in that state, okay? So they can't try you for that crime in that state. So the governor of Kansas has to call the governor of Oklahoma and say, hey, you have this guy in your possession that is wanted for armed robbery in Wichita. We would like to, what's the word? Somebody just extradite, okay? So extradition is the process of returning somebody that is wanted for a crime back to the place where they committed that crime. Okay? Now, if you think you can, make it to Mexico, okay, just keep going and make it to Mexico or elude authorities. So if you're thinking about committing a heinous crime and fleeing to Mexico or Canada, once you get there, are you good? I mean, like, you're safe?
You gotta fly to a country.
So we have extradition treaties with most nations. Yes? The nations we don't have extradition treaties, I'll let you look them up, but you might be better off in a federal prison with 3 meals a day, AC, heat, that sort of thing, than living in, say, North Korea or Iran as a Christian. So if you're thinking about it, heinous crime, look it up. Now, you guys know financial crimes. You've all heard of Swiss banks, right? Everybody, Swiss bank. Switzerland, their laws don't allow for the banks to share information with other governments. Okay, and this is why people hide their money in Swiss banks. There's also some in the Bahamas that you can use as well if this ever becomes an issue for you. Okay, you're trying to hide your money from taxation. And there are a lot of wealthy Americans that do this. There's a lot of wealthy Russians right now that don't have access to their money in other countries' accounts. You following me? Like, because people like to park their money in the United States as well, okay, in our banks. And so we cut off access to that to the Russian people, their oligarchs. And also, with really the leadership of the European Union, we have now sanctioned Russia when it comes to the SWIFT bank. SWIFT, not Swiss. SWIFT. That's the one where you can use your credit card anywhere in the world, basically, because of the SWIFT bank. That has now been shut off to the Russians. The Russian people, the Russian government. Okay? And as I mentioned the other day, we were talking about Turkey and Germany. Yes? They have both stepped up. Okay? Even neutral countries like Sweden sending weapons to the Ukraine now. Okay? Now, you've probably heard this stuff about Putin. Our CIA, our intelligence agencies are saying that they think there's something wrong with him. Like something's off. He's unstable. Now, I don't know if they're just doing that to try and get people in Russia to there's something wrong with Putin, we need to take him out type of thing, or they're actually believe there's something going on with him. So I don't know if that's real or contrived. You know what I mean? I think, yeah, he's about the same age as Biden. Oh, yeah, he's in better shape. Yeah.
Have you seen him work?
Have you seen him with his shirt on? He likes to pose for pictures with his shirt on. Okay. Like riding a horse, you know, with no shirt on.
Did you see the video, like, ice bucket challenge still a thing, like, an easy ice bucket challenge?
Oh, I didn't see that.
Instead of doing an ice bucket, he got onto a nuclear submarine, drove it into the Arctic Ocean, and then jumped into the ocean.
Okay.
He's a mess. Okay. Any Shocker basketball fans in here? Shocker basketball? I don't know if you remember Teray Murray. He was back about 10 years ago when they were good. And he plays professionally in Ukraine. So a lot of former Shockers play in Europe and stuff, basketball. And Teray Murray, I saw him interviewed by Fox News, actually. He kind of told about his escape from the Ukraine after, everything went down, getting out of the country. He tried to get into Poland, couldn't, and so had to go down to Romania. But he said, he's trying to get back to his family. He lives in Houston, his son's there. And so he was just grateful to be reunited with his family. But he talked about how at the border, the women and children are leaving, right? And he was watching fathers say goodbye to their kids. The fathers aren't allowed to leave if you're under the age of 60. And so he just kind of talked about how, that was really humbling to watch, that go on and know that he was going to get to be reunited with his son. And these folks are going to be fighting for their country and hopefully surviving. So I think really the whole world, even China has, kind of gotten behind this idea of what Putin is doing is wrong and it needs to stop. But from what I understand, Putin has not slowed down. They're supposed to be having some talks. Did you see anything on that?
Nothing like on the news if they've like come to any compromise, but like while they were talking, they like cluster bombed not Kiev, but
the second largest city. Yeah, I heard that this morning. A lot of missile attacks. I don't know the name of the city, but it's so no ceasefire while the talks are going on. Apparently, right? Okay. So privileges and immunities. Can you describe this for me on the test briefly? Like say, okay. So what Article 4 talks about with privileges and immunities, that if you're a resident of a state, you have certain privileges that you are granted, okay? And you have certain immunities from persecution in other states if you're a resident of a different state, okay? Which would include something like extradition, okay? So that's brief, it's easy. I have a lot of 2-point short answers on the next steps, okay? Okay. All right. Still talking about Article 4. All right. We talk about states and adding new states. So we started with 13 when they wrote this, right? So now we're at 50. So creating new states. Now let's just stay with Kansas because we're in Kansas. So before Kansas was a state, it was a what? Territory. Yes, ma'am. Now, right now we have United States has 4 territories, right? We got American Samoa, American Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and Guam. Okay, so we have 4 territories. Any of those could petition to become a state. All right. You got to have certain requirements. Really, there's only 2 requirements you need. First is that you have to have a certain number of people. Now, you probably taught this last year in history class, but I don't know if you remember. It's in that long-term memory. How many people have to live in a territory for it to petition to become a state? What'd you say? You're close. You need 60,000 people. It's in the Constitution. Okay?
Montana.
How many people live in, like,
Utah.
Well, Wyoming and Alaska are the smallest populated. Yeah.
Could you get kicked out if you don't have 60,000? Say like
So-
Kansas,
No.
we decrease under then, we like
Okay.
not become state.
other states
Like,
petition
kick
us
it
to
out.
lose it?
How did Rhode Island get that many
Pluto.
people? It's so tiny.
Okay, listen, it's, is it bigger than the city of Wichita?
Yeah.
Yes. How many people live in the city of Wichita? Like 300,000.
Oh, okay. But like theoretically, like if Apple's right, like let's just say like either
You
one
drop-
leave, yeah.
Okay, so after we add new states, we'll talk about obligations that the national government has to the states. And one of the things they can't do is mess with your borders without your permission. So if they're gonna do away with you, I would think that is messing with your borders, and they can't do that. Okay, so no, if you drop below 60, you're still good. Okay, now, all right, so you got 60,000. The other thing you have to do is you got to write a constitution. Okay, this constitution must have a representative government. Every state allows the people of their states to elect their state legislatures, their city councils, their mayors, and so forth. We have a representative government in all 50 states. So this is called, these two things basically is enabling. It's called an enabling act, which allows a territory with 60,000 people to write a constitution. Okay, you've been enabled to do that. Okay, now Puerto Rico already has a constitution, right? Do they have representative government in Puerto Rico or dictatorship? They have a representative government. Okay, the head of Puerto Rico is the governor. Okay, and they're elected. Okay, and then they have a legislative body. Okay, and guys, yeah. Oh gosh, I don't know. Let me guess, and then somebody can look it up.
Puerto Rico is like it's above Cuba.
Let's guess. I'm gonna guess 18 million, 24 million.
In Puerto Rico?
No, 18 million.
In Puerto Rico.
That's a lot.
3.2 million. I'm off.
It's just like 6 times.
It is more than. It is more. Well, a lot of them moved here. There are a lot of Puerto Ricans in the United States. Yes, which they are allowed to do. Okay. Now, if Puerto Rico wanted to become a state, and they have had referendums from time to time in Puerto Rico asking the Puerto Rican people if they want to become a state. And every time they've done that, it has failed. Okay, but it's been fairly close. I think like 53 to 47 against. Now, the U.S. Congress would have to approve them coming in as a state. Yes.
What is like the disadvantage of them becoming a state?
Paying for it.
Okay. Would that be like the only thing that they'd be like?
Yeah, I mean, they have many of the benefits of being part of the United States, but not being a state. Many of the benefits, like including protection of our military, that they don't have to pay for as much as we do. Yeah. So Congress, they really have a lot of unanimity. Is that a good thing? Unanimity? Yes. Okay. To act on their own accord within their territory. Okay. Congress would have to approve an act of admission. Okay, and it would become a state. So we could go as high as 54 states if all of them wanted to join. They all have representative governments, and they all have 60,000 people. Okay. Have you guys ever known any American Samoans? It's in the South Pacific, South Pacific. They're literally, guys, they're a nation of giants.
Yeah.
Like they are large people. Women are big, the men are big. I went to school with some in Florida. They play, you know, a lot of like professional wrestlers. There's quite a few in the NFL. Yeah, American Samoa. Solomon. Here it is, right here. There's Fiji. Yeah, it's American Samoa. I don't know why they don't have it on there. Polynesia. Polynesia. This is where I'm going. Do I get the booster shot? I'll have to find Marshall Islands. I think it's Marshall Islands. Northern Mariana? Yeah, it is USA. No, I need a passport. I'm going to French. Okay. All right. All right. You ready? Okay. Some obligations. Okay. Obligations that the national government has to the states. Okay. If there is an invasion of the country, i.e. Red Dawn, yeah, the original, yeah, Charlie Sheen, yeah, yeah. If you have not seen Red Dawn, the original, you need to see Red Dawn, the original. Okay, outstanding. Okay. Now, it'll make you proud to be an American. Okay. Now, if there's an invasion or domestic violence, okay, an invasion or domestic violence. So usually what we will use is the National Guard. Okay, and each state has a National Guard. So the Kansas National Guard is controlled by the governor, Laura Kelly. Okay, if there's a big tornado or something like that, we need rescue recovery. She can call out the National Guard to help with that. Now, the federal government, the national government, trains the National Guard and pays the salaries of the National Guard. Okay, but the states get to use them in case of domestic violence or something like that. Okay. The other obligation is the one that I mentioned just a moment ago, was that they have to respect the territorial integrity of the state. So they can't change the border of the state without the state's permission. Now, the one exception we have this was during the Civil War. You guys know Virginia used to be a lot bigger than it is now. So when they seceded from the Union, well, they weren't a state anymore, I guess. So they changed the border of Virginia and created West Virginia. Sorry about that. West Virginia. Any of you guys been to West Virginia? It's actually a really pretty state. It gets a bad rap. Kind of like Arkansas. Right? Don't Kansas like to make fun of Arkansas? Yeah. Arkansas, yeah. Hillbillies.
Arkansas literally named their state after the same Indians there.
Who was first?
Kansas.
Kansas was before Arkansas? Really?
Go back to Nebraska.
I gotta look it up right now.
Yes, look that up.
Isn't there state flag? Isn't there a state whose state flag is literally the Confederate flag?
They
Or
changed
was?
it.
Oh, that was Mississippi.
Okay.
I mean, at least any flag is better than our flag. Ours is just the state seal on a blue background.
Which is the
Arkansas
same,
is
but it's a
around
nice
here.
seal. I like ours.
Before us.
Yeah.
So they use the river first. What's the name of the river?
In every state
What's
besides.
I bet the river was named before. Probably by those two people.
Either way,
Yeah, those two people.
How's your history degree?
I don't teach that part of history.
Where did the Indian
Wow.
territory name?
Don't listen to her, just keep on doing a great teacher.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
I never said you were gonna go. I'm just wondering, obviously the WSU teaching. That's where my parents want me to go. What you said. That's where my parents want me to go.
To get your teaching degree?
My teaching degree.
I did that like 25 years ago, so I'm sure it's changed.
Oh.
But I had some professors.
I don't.
You'll love multicultural education. That's a fabulous one.
wait, the one where you have that.
Yes. It was a black female teacher. There's like 6 people in class, right? And there were 2 other black women, and then a very liberal white guy, and then another Christian white guy like me. And we actually kind of became friends a little bit because, and I just kept my mouth shut. Now some of it was interesting, like we studied Native American stuff and you know, went down to the museum, but I had to come up with like a dance, a Native American dance, and like perform it.
Can you recreate that for us?
I did a rain dance.
Can you recreate it for us?
Yeah, I had the steps, you know, like I made pictures of the steps that you did. I mean, it's kind of interesting. But, you know, again, they make you feel guilty for being a white male. You know what I mean? You're just like, you're a pariah. I don't like being treated like that, you know? I care about other people, you know what I mean? So, look, culture is interesting. Different cultures are good. Now, I'm just gonna say this. I'm sorry. We're talking about it now. I can't stop. Can't turn back. All right? All right. Listen, it doesn't matter what race you are. Okay? The law treats you equally. Now, you as an individual, when you look at other people of other races, it's on you whether you treat them with respect and whether you judge them by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. All right? That's on you. Okay? Now, so in my view, all races are equal. They're all equal. Everybody's different. There's good people of every race. There's bad people of every race. Yes? Okay. Now, let's talk about culture. Ooh. Don't talk about culture. Let's talk about culture. Okay. It's dangerous when you talk about culture, because you get yourself in trouble. Are some cultures better than other cultures?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Can you give me an example, Daryl?
Well, I mean, there were cultures 1,000 years ago that thought that human sacrificing to the sun.
Like the Aztecs. That's not, I don't like that culture. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
Are you? Okay. All right, let's bring in some stereotypes here, which is always fun. Let's talk about Asian culture.
Go for it.
And let's talk about Asian culture and education. Is it fair to say, or is it a stereotype, that many Asian families, culturally, put a high emphasis on education? Is that fair to say, Melissa? Okay. Is that a good culture? To put an emphasis on education? Most people would say that's a good culture. Like, give me some more of that. We need more of that, right? It's like the culture in my family, which was white, education wasn't very important. Neither of my parents graduated from college. So education really wasn't that big of a deal. Like, I got C's. When I got C's, parents were like, all right, good job. That's better than a D. I'm not making that up. You know what I mean? Like, listen, some of you get in trouble for your grades. Yes?
Yes.
I never got in trouble for my grades. And they were not good. Okay? Because my dad owned his own business. He's like, you know, he didn't want me to go to college. He wanted me to go to work. He wanted me to, you know, do his business. You know what I mean? He wasn't worried about it because he was making lots of money and he never graduated from college. He made more money than I am with a master's degree. You know what I mean? So it wasn't that big of a deal. But I think Asian culture when it comes to education is excellent. You know, another thing, a lot of Asian culture, or especially Filipino culture, is really care for the elderly. Like how important the elderly are in that culture. How's that culture for in the United States for the elderly? And that goes across all races for the elderly. Yep, put them in the home, right? Guilty. Guilty. Now, my dad needed a nursing home. He needed 24-hour care. Okay. And, you know, his wife that he married after my mom died, she took care of him for a long time. And so we wanted to help take care of her financially after my dad passed. And we have been helping her for a long time. Okay, because she helped us. She took care of dad. Okay. But still, it's different. You know what I mean? If you ever got to have somebody that's going to look out for a parent of yours, they need care. You can find someone that's Filipino to do that. And now that may be a stereotype and I might get fired for that, but I'm thinking this may be the right person. Okay, it is really important in their culture. Okay, ask Lawrence. Okay, so is it fair to say some cultures are better than others? Now, here's one of the things that happens in our inner cities a lot. Is you will have kids, like in heavy African-American schools, kids that succeed and work hard and do well, read well, and do good in school, sometimes get picked on for acting what? Acting white. Is that good culture? Not good culture. Okay? And when you get to college, guys, I'm sorry, but you're not going to be able to say that some cultures are better than others. You have to look at those cultures through the eyes of those cultures. This is called being ethnocentric. When you look at other cultures through your culture and judge them, you're being ethnocentric. Don't be ethnocentric. You've got to look at the world through their eyes. Okay? Well, I'm sorry, I can't always do that. I can just judge things on what I see as good or bad. Now, maybe I'm not allowed to speak out on that. And maybe one day we won't be able to speak out on that. Maybe we'll take that away from us and we'll have hate, what's the word? Speech codes that we can only say certain things. Who was the person that got in trouble? Did you guys hear about the head of the Kansas State Department of Education, Dr. Randy Watson? Any of you guys hear about this? Come on! It's been all over the newspaper. Dr. Watson is in charge of the whole state of education in the state of Kansas. He used to be the superintendent for McPherson. And McPherson, while he was superintendent, said, you know what? We're going to opt out of the state assessments. We're going to do our own thing. You're like, can you do that? He says, yeah, that's what we're going to do. And then they named him the head of the KSE. I'm like, okay, I like this guy. Right there, okay. He stands up to the education bureaucracy. So now he is the education bureaucracy. Now, what he wants to do, and I agree with what he wants to do, he wants to make sure that the students in Kansas are ready for the workplace. Not just college, but the workplace. This is why we have the trade academy. This is why we have the art academy. This is why we have the teacher academy. This is why we have the health academy. Because Dr. Watt, this is the direction Kansas is going in education. And I like it. Don't you? Doesn't it make sense? I think it's wonderful. Okay, because we got through this mindset that everybody should go to college. Okay, and I don't agree with that. You don't teach my first hour. I'm kidding. But no, I mean, listen. if people want to go to college, they have a right to go to college, even though they may not be ready for college. That was me. Okay? The only reason I went to college is because I could continue to play baseball. And I didn't even know what a college credit hour was my senior year of high school. Applications. What? College. What do you do? What are you supposed to do? Fill out I need someone to play baseball. So I just went and tried out for these teams, and none of them offered me a scholarship. You know what I mean? So they said, you can walk on. I said, oh, what's that mean? He said, well, you don't have a scholarship, but you can try out for the team. So, okay. So I picked the coach I liked the best, and I went to Chipola Junior College in Marianna, Florida. Okay. And I enrolled in school. I don't think I had to I took the SAT, but I don't think it mattered. It's junior college, right? They just want your money. Yes.
Yeah.
You have to get it accepted.
It's more of a format.
Yeah, it's a formality. Okay. So anyhow, what was I talking about? Not being ready for college, right? So certainly, guys, I figured out how to be a good student eventually, and now I have a master's degree, Master Ebright. Yes. It took me till I was 53. Some of you guys will have master's degrees by the time you're 23. Right? You're better students than I was, okay? But maybe I should have gone into the military like my dad. Okay? I don't know. I like where I wound up. So the opportunity to go to college, I think everybody should have. But I don't think we should necessarily take a kid that's sitting in senior English class, not reading any of the books, just trying to get a C or a D to graduate and get a piece of paper. I think we should take that kid and we should take him in something that he's interested in and help him start working towards a good job, like trade school, which we're starting to do now. They still have to take English 4. Because we want them to be able to read and write. Okay? Now, everybody that's in English 4 at Bishop Carroll knows how to read and write. But not everybody at Northwest High School that's in English 4 knows how to read and write. They've made it that far. You understand? Okay? So, I like what so this is what I was talking about. Dr. Watson, okay? So, he was on a Zoom call. And he was telling a story. And he said, I had some cousins, and this was a long time ago, he said, I had some cousins that lived in California, and they were coming to Kansas to visit. And they were worried about the tornado. And he said, you don't need to worry about tornadoes. You have to worry about your house being raided by the Indians. This was a long time ago, and he was just telling a story. He was being funny, right? The governor of Kansas, Laura Kelly, called for him to be fired. Members on the KSDE school board, the board, some of them thought he should be fired. He turned in a letter of resignation, and they rejected it. Dr. Randy Watson is a good man. He cares about kids in the state. He's doing a really good job at his job. As good as you can in an education bureaucracy, which is not easy. So he will not be stepping down. One win for common sense, one loss for cancel culture. He did not lose his job. Think he should have been fired for that? He apologized. He did. He apologized. That was distasteful. It was mean. It was racist. It was whatever the code words you got to say. He said it. Guy, follow me on this? Should he have lost his job? He made a mistake. He ought to know better to say something. Okay. Now, if it's with his friends, does that make him a racist? You're kidding with your California people that don't know about Kansas. I don't know. Everybody's got a different opinion on that one. Okay. Now, if you're a Native American, maybe you're offended by that. Maybe you think it's funny that people would actually think that was true in 2021, 2022. Right? All right. So, guys, this is the world we live in. And it can either get better or it can get worse. Right? Dr. Watson staying on that job, I think, makes us better. Okay, what are we talking about?
Obligation.
Territorial integrity.
Yeah, that's Article 4. We're done with Article 4. Okay. Article 5 of the Constitution. How much time we got? All right, we'll get into this more detail tomorrow, but just right here. Article 5. Amend the Constitution. 2 ways to propose an amendment. 2 ways to ratify. Yep. Which means formally approve, to ratify. Okay. I will get into the details of that. I do have a section in your, or page in the book on that. When you look at that, it looks really complicated, so I'm going to uncomplicate it for you in the notes Wednesday, and then we're going to start learning the amendments. Guys, the rest of the week. So the rest of the week, talk about how this is done and all the amendments. And I've got a kind of a, I think it's a fun exercise that we'll do on that. So make sure you bring these books Wednesday and enjoy your Tuesday. And yes, you can go change into your scrubs.
Thanks.
I'm going to be going to the